What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the vlog. Unfortunately, today's title is not clickbait. I've got some serious issues with my beloved 2JZ swapped E46. The car runs, it starts up every time. The problem is when it starts up, it does this. Now, aside from the obvious, with tons of smoke coming from the exhaust manifold, from the turbo, through the exhaust, we also have way too high of a crankcase pressure. We've got too high of oil pressure. We've got gas getting into the oil. We've got fuel pressure staying too low no matter what I do to adjust the regulator. We've got some idling issues. Well, yeah, there's a ton of more gremlins going in the car. Now, some of this stuff is expected when you do an engine swap and kind of working through some of those gremlins. Some of it's definitely tuning based, and I am by no means a tuner. In fact, I'm even less of a tuner than I am a mechanic. Go figure. But there's also some deeper mechanical issues. We shouldn't have gas getting into the oil at the rate that it's going. We shouldn't have so high of a crankcase pressure. With those kind of being lingering issues, meaning I've had them throughout the history of this build from the moment that I fired the car up for the very first time a few years ago. That leads me to believe that my cylinders may be a little worn. Now, when I built the engine the first time, not knowing all the things that I didn't know back then, I didn't measure the cylinder bores for clearance. I didn't measure the pistons, even though they were brand new GTE pistons. I didn't check out bearing clearances. All stuff that you guys are probably like, well, duh, idiot. How could you not do that? I just didn't. I didn't know. Well, I know now, so what we're going to do next is I'm going to prep this engine to be pulled out. My buddy D from Washington State flew all the way across the country just to help me pull this engine out. Not true, obviously, but he's here. He's going to help me pull it out. We're going to see if we can get this thing taken out of the car, stripped completely down to just the bare block, and start our measurements all in a day. Now, this won't be my first time pulling the engine. If you guys have been following me on Instagram or following the Skunkwerks page on Instagram, you know that I've had this engine out a ton of times. But this is going to be his first engine pull, I believe. So hopefully I'm able to teach him just a little bit, and hopefully he'll take what I taught him and then go find real help for when he does his. Well, anyway, let's get this started. I'm going to go ahead and prep the engine and waiting for him to come over. So I'm going to start pulling off the wiring harness, the intercooler piping, and start draining some of these fluids. It's going to be a mess, but it should be fun. We'll check back in with you guys. Okay, so we got most of the connectors taken off for the wiring harness. There are a few that are tucked underneath the intake manifold that I just can't get to right now. So we're going to ignore them for the time being. Next up is we got to get this fuel rail off. Now, some of you guys may have noticed that I made the mistake of not depressurizing the fuel system before I started unplugging all the connectors. So, learn from my mistake. If you're going to do this, depressurize the fuel system first. no big deal. I've already got a ton of dry sweep on the floor from a previous spill, so I'm gonna let the gas that does fall out into that. And of course I'll try to keep it as controlled or clean as I can. But as you can see, this isn't exactly a high quality shop. Alright, so not the cleanest removal, but I got a decent amount trapped down in the cup. Luckily it's just the power steering pump on this side and the AC compressor, which this car doesn't have AC, so nothing to worry about. Of course we'll go ahead and clean it all up before we put it back in, just because that's the right thing to do. So let's set this off to the side. Alright, so now we're going to make an attempt at getting the intake manifold off. I can get to all but one of the bolts for sure, but I think we can do it.
Rise on the track.
Now there's one right back here. And the problem is right now it's at one of those weird little half turns. Got it. There we go. Took a little bit. Alright, now that everything cut off, got this all unbolted. Unfortunately, we missed most of it, but not that big of a deal. Get this clamp off and we should be good to pull it. Okay, so it's the next day, and as you can see, we did get the engine pulled. We didn't record it just because you guys have already seen me pull the engine in and out of the car. You guys have seen me take the head off. You guys have seen me take the accessory drive off in previous videos. And if you haven't seen them, go ahead and check them out. But one video that I don't have is I don't have a video of me actually dealing with the rotating assembly. So that's kind of where we're going to pick up today. I've got my suspicions about what's wrong with this block. Pistons seem fine. I mean, there was no piston valve clearance, so I don't think anything in the head came loose and started floating around. But I think the block is just worn out. It's an old block, so I just think the walls are worn out. Other than that, we're going to go ahead and pop the pistons out. Pop the pistons out, pop the crank out. We're going to check the cylinder walls to make sure that the bores aren't, or see if the bores are worn out. If the bores are worn out, we're just going to bore the engine out and kind of start that path to a stroker kit. But before we can do any of that, we obviously have to get the stuff out. So I'm going to stop talking and start pulling these pistons out. So we got all 6 pistons out. Only dropped one. Crank's still floating pretty good. Definitely not a lubrication issue on the crank. All right, so now we're gonna pop the mains off and then get the crank out, flip the engine over, and start measuring. Ooh, forgot how big these cranks are. Nothing feels out of place. But I'll probably pop those out at a later date. Let's see, we'll get you guys in here. So far, everything looks all right. All right, so far everything on the engine looks all right. It seems to check out. Didn't notice much with the bearings or the journals on the crank. One of the rods had a little concern for me, but that's not my big concern right now. My big concern is going to be the actual cylinder bore, which we're going to measure right now. All right, so now that we got our bore gauge set up, it's zeroed out to match the 3.3858 inches that the bore should be. We're going to take 6 different measurements on here. So first we're going to go on the thrust axis, and we're going to measure at the top and the middle and the bottom of the cylinder. And then we're going to go axial with it, or in line with the crankshaft, and do the same thing, top, middle, and bottom. So this is where we'll find out if we're at a worn block. That looks to be almost right on the money. 1,000. Maybe even just a little bit less. Yeah, I'll get just a little bit less. So we'll give that plus 0.0009. Now we're gonna get just a little bit deeper in the cylinder. To the thrust on number 3. Oh yeah, see, this is real bad. We need a 14. Alright, so you guys have seen enough of how this works. I'm basically just going to do the last 3 cylinders, and we'll get all those numbers, kind of get an average for it. And then we're going to measure the pistons. Once we measure the diameter of the pistons, we'll subtract it from the diameter of the cylinder. That should give us our oil clearance. And given how worn these cylinders are, I'm going to go ahead and guess that we're going to have way too much clearance between the cylinder walls and the piston skirts. So that's explaining a lot of the issues I was having with the positive crank pressure, the gas getting through, and all that blow by. So at least we're finding it now. Let me hop back to measuring the rest of this, and then I'll get back with you guys when it's time to measure the pistons.
Rise on the track.
Alright, so now that we got our piston diameter measurements, the only thing left to do is to find our piston clearance. And to do that, we're just going to subtract the piston diameter from the cylinder bore diameter, and that should come somewhere into a range of 0.0028 and 0.0030 with a max wear or max clearance of 0.0047, I believe. Either way, all of them checked out. They still have the right clearance. Most of them are getting close to that max wear, and that's just due to the cylinders being so worn out. And none of it really matters at this point, because we already know the solution is going to be either ditch the block altogether, which I'm probably not going to do, or what's most likely going to happen is I'm going to bore the block out, and we'll just kind of start down that path of increasing displacement. Alright, so next up we're going to start measuring the crank. So we're going to check our main journals, our rod journals, and then we're going to check our main bores to make sure that everything's still in tolerance. This is more so just to make sure that we get the right bearing thickness to have the right oil clearances. But judging by taking it apart, none of the cylinders were getting starved of oil. There's no grinding marks, so everything should check out within tolerance. So get that knocked out, and then we'll wrap up the video. I'm going to go ahead and just make sure all of our bearings are good. So I'm going to clean it up, make sure there's nothing on there that might give me a false reading. We've got our mic already. We've got our notepad. And a pen. The mic's already been zeroed out. So we're looking for a reading somewhere between 2.4403 and 2.4409. Alright, so as expected, all of our main journals check out. They're all within tolerance, within a few 10,000ths of an inch. So the crank should be good to go. We'll check the main bores just to get an idea of our bearing and our clearances in there. Again, I'm not too worried about it. These are forged rotating assemblies, so either way, we'll check it just to check it. It won't hurt. So with that, thanks for watching. Again, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Don't miss out on your chance to win some free stuff. Also, click the notification bell so you can get updates and know when we're posting about the 2JZ. Or if you're into V8s, we got an LS build going on, as well as an old 351 Cleveland if you're into the older muscle cars. So we got a little bit of something for everybody. Some off-road stuff coming soon. And yeah, see you next time.